on Chesil Beach, 2019, starring Saorise, Ronan, Emily Watson. Set on the west coast, southwest coast of England. This young couple are on their honeymoon, and we immediately get to see them having a special dinner provided by the hotel. The groom is starting to get horny. Initially, we're in 1962. There was references on the radio to Kennedy, Wilsonite, and then the film, I think, jumps forward a decade. The groom appears to have a sort of dream premonition of the future, and his wife is behaving in an odd manner, so to speak, in the garden, naked. There's an inkling of a disagreement. Florence is her name, alias Roman. She expresses a desire to go back to the beach. He really isn't that motivated, but immediately U-turns to try and meet her desires, and then she also U-turns, and then she starts to suggest that it's their first row and she's responsible. And then we jettison forward again to the time when the Berlin Wall came down, which would be almost 20 years. The movie's adapted from a novel, 2007 novel written by Ian McEwan, and the early frames suggest two young people who are functioning really as children, have no sort of insight or awareness of the means towards having a sex on their wedding night, being both virgins, and even after only 10 minutes it becomes clear that they're fumbling around really in trying to create the right atmosphere to walk hand in hand into what should be a momentous night of passion. The couple's sharing of events and the past with regard to family, etc. We visualise, and the first thing is Edward's mother having a serious accident at a railway station when she's hit by a door that's opened. She's standing far too close to the track. Edward described the aftermath of that accident as a mother with brain damage, and we get a gist of it when he receives he's 18, I guess, he receives a letter from the postman saying that he got a first class honours degree, and his mother's totally superfluous to it. He's preoccupied with trying to work out two pieces of information, both of which she's forgotten, which are trivial to say the least. Edward's sisters aren't interested in the news either. His father's not back till later, and he's desperate to share his joy, and ends up rushing to the telephone box to try and track down friends, and that draws a blank as well. His magical moment, virtually becoming irrelevant. That's what I think has been passed on. He then, desperately wanting to have some action, rushes off on his bike and catches the bus into the city. Well, we assume it's either Oxford or Cambridge, and he settles down with his half a pint of beer alone. There's a raucous rock and roll soundtrack, and after swilling some beer, we catch a sort of like a blackboard outside on the street, advertising the CND March in Oxford. And there, of course, Edward feasts his eyes on Florence for the first time when he arrives at the event. The other scene where I suggested it was 10 years further forward, that was wrong. It was actually before the honeymoon, when the courtship had begun, because we then have a period where the two of them are struggling desperately to sort of disrobe and get on with it, and just haven't got any confidence to be uninhibited. And we then go back to Florence, talking to her sister, I assume, about the young man, Edward. It's actually sweet when we see the cumbersome clumsiness. But we've now got a scene where they go on a punt down the river in Oxford, and then sort of picnic on the bank, and it gets quite sort of touchingly romantic about recalling their first glances at each other. Back to Chesil Beach. It's interesting that Florence, looking at her character, within the sort of music fraternity, she's quite dominant, decisive, and with her family clearly is viewed as the elder sister. But with her relationship with Edward, she's far more reticent. Not entirely so, but significantly more tentative in what comes out of her mouth. It's clear, though, that her upper class background and her parents moving in those sort of social circles of sort of very important people, whereas Edward, his circle is very much on the edge of the middle classes, but basically more sort of working class, and his opportunity to go to university was a rarity by his social group. Back to the bedroom, and Edward starts to begin to unzip Florence's frock, but he can't complete it. He's not inept enough, and he gets very negative towards himself, and then he ends up sharing a story of his violence towards a fellow student whilst out one night. after this other was bullying or making some adverse comment to a boy that he was with, and he certainly has a short fuse. And then Florence started describing her family and her father's rather adverse views of Jews, fitted in between the dialogue, which is quite tense. We get little pictures of England in the summer, the cricket, for example, and then the what? And then the colours on the trees in summer. It's all very pretty. Edward appears to have the responsibility as the groundsman at the cricket, and they playfully mix using the roller as a toy. Edward's an expert on birds, recognising birds. However, Florence isn't. He sort of scolds her playfully when she gets it wrong, describing what sort of bird. Of course, birds in England, well, when I was a kid, they were a thing of beauty. They make their way back to Edward's house. Of course, his mother, brain damaged, is doing some collaging or whatever, and she's naked from the waist upwards, displaying her small breasts to all and sundry. Edward is somewhat embarrassed, but Florence seems to take it in her stride. There's this very sort of tender talk between the two with regard to whether he's experienced intercourse before, and he starts off with typical male bravado to try and give the impression that he's an experienced guy, and it slowly erodes to the point where eventually he tells her that she is his first. But it's very well done. Flo is seen with the local vicar. One assumes he's going to be involved in the marital service, and he manages to get a pulse of her self-doubt, but she almost panics when he suggests that she can change her mind about the marriage, and she's a bumbling fool. We witness the clumsy, cumbersome first sexual act between the two. When she assists his entry, he becomes extremely excitable and ejaculates within seconds. I know that feeling. Then she completely has a panic attack, possibly because as a virgin she bled a little, and jettisons out of the room. An absolute disaster. Edward's invited to play tennis with Florence's father. Florence points out that her father has got this sort of obsession about thrashing people at tennis, and advises Edward to allow this, and that's what transpires. But right at the end, Florence arrives, and it brings out the worst in her father, who goes completely berserk, accusing his daughter of spying on him. Eventually Edward tracks her down a couple of miles down the beach, and they have a pretty heavy row. This there's an exchange of guilt, who's responsible for the mess, the poor sexual experience. Each accuses each other. Typical of lack of communication. Florence then lays out how she sees it all in terms of her love for Edward and his, but that she's totally hopeless with regard to sex, and she uses a comparison with a homosexual couple, and the inference being that they could be together, but he seek out alternatives to satisfy his sexual cravings, as she, although would respond, she wouldn't do it with any enthusiasm, and can't see her change. Edward responds by describing Florence as frigid and suggesting that he was conned, that she just wanted the trappings, the status, the image, but that she is frigid. When Edward returns to the hotel room, Florence is gone, and he gets completely smashed. And then we have the rendition of The Thrill Is Gone. He then packs his bags after returning to his own home and ventures round to Flo's parents, well, mother, and she ain't there either. We then get led towards the annulment due to non-consummation, part of common law. We then jump forward to 1975 to the sound of Telegram Sam by T-Rex. It's 21st century toy, not Telegram Sam. Edward is now working in a record shop, and there's this transaction involving a young girl, small girl, who I recognise, possibly one of Flo's sisters, maybe, who asks for a Chuck Berry record and he gives it to her for free. Edward, with his friends, shares the experience of that wedding night, but in the third person. But I'm not quite sure whether the listeners see beyond that. We rush forward to 2007, the cricket, and then there's Amy Winehouse music. Edward hears on the radio about this recital for the quartet, with Florence's names mentioned and her husband. He turns the radio off. All these years on, they catch each other's eyes. Edward's in the audience. He starts to break down. She's startled, but then continues to play. The recital ends and then a tear shed by Florence as well, and we flash back to the beach, that final argument, and this time we get a conversation that we didn't have or hear before. She invites him to come back with her after apologising. He shifts position and turns his back on her. At that point she walks on.